iRealPro is a fantastic application for iOS and Android, and it means that you can practice along with standards or indeed pop and rock songs, and you can change key, you can change tempo, you can do everything. But it's also really good for live gigs, especially when there's that organic element, that is, a solo player or singer. Suddenly the backing track doesn't seem so sort of computerized anymore because it's got something organic over the top. Now, you can also, as I've done, I've recorded gigs and I've come back into the studio and recorded extra parts on top. But there's also other things you can do with iRealPro to make that experience, to make the whole thing gel a bit better. Let's take a look. Here then I've got my little iPhone SE, which you can see on your screen there, with a little backing track on it. Now this is the iRealPro app and it's fantastic. If I just open the little mixer pane at the bottom here, you can see there's a little mixer icon. You can see I've got guitar, bass and drums, and it sounds a bit like this. So there's Freddie Freeloader, Miles Davis tune from his album A Kind of Blue, and this is just the backing track that I used. Now, if you play something organic over the top, like guitar, saxophone, singing, whatever, it can hide the fact that you've got a computerized backing track. The sounds are quite sort of artificial, but there's quite a lot you can do with it. Now, on my main computer screen here, I've got the track on channel 2 here, which is just exactly the same as the phone, like that. And I've also got my guitar track. Now this was taken from my mobile phone footage, so it is only in AAC quality, not even WAV quality. But I've got a channel EQ here, so I've tried to single out the guitar part from the backing track. See, it's quite grainy in quality, but it's good enough for the production, especially when you combine it with the backing track that I've loaded straight on here. Now, if I take that EQ away, so it's quite bassy and there's a bit of top end there as well. So ideally, I want to reinstate that EQ so that there is a definite separation between the backing track and the guitar. So I've got the two tracks open now. So I've got that. Now it would be nice to have a little bit more control, sort of, post-gig, over the mixer in terms of the drums, the bass and the guitar that are on the iRealPro backing track. Now you can do that on this phone. If I was to, for example, if I just go back to the mixer here, I'm going to take away the guitar and the bass, leaving just the drum part. So we've got this. Just the drums. Now, how do I do that then? Well, what I do is I go to the top button here and click Share Audio. Now, it'll ask me to do a couple of things, WAV, AAC or MIDI. Now, you can actually export this as a MIDI file. I'm not going to do that here. That's the scope for another video. But I'm going to share just the WAV of the drums only. Now, as you can see, it's just exporting audio. It takes a little time to render that. But essentially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to airdrop it to my computer. So in order to do that, I'm just going to name that iReal Mix. And at the same time, I'm going to just send that over to my Mac, and that's coming in now. So there's your iReal Mix. Now I'm going to create another track here, which is going to be for just the drums. So if I go import audio file, so that's here, there we go, create audio file. Now I've done this a few times, so it's actually Freddie Freeloader 7.wav. So you've got to sort of keep a little bit of an eye on where things are. Now if I just solo this out, you can see that I've now got my drums only on the computer. If I just verify that, there we go, that's actually in the chorus. There we go, there's the sound that we had just now. Now if I just open that up, luckily I've got the click, the 4-bar, or 4-beat I should say, intro, and you can see that if I just zoom in on the computer screen, you can see the drum click, the intro here. So I've got to make sure I drag these exactly right, because if I don't, obviously that's going to sound a bit weird. Yeah, I'm almost a beat out there. So you can see where the mouse is, there's actually a beat there. Now I can also increase the scale of this so I can see a little bit better. It doesn't change the gain, it just makes you able to really get the clicks so they're utterly lined up. I mean, that's pretty much there. Don't worry too much, it's obviously your ears are the judge to check that everything is aligned. So I've now got the drums and the guitar, the original track only. Doing the same, if I just add another couple of tracks there, in fact I'll add another 3 tracks. So there's my 3 tracks now. I'm just going to name this drums as well. Now I'm going to go on these other tracks and type bass, a guitar. These are all the iRealPro sounds. And then piano. So with the bass, I just go back to my phone. There we go. I'm just going to get the drums muted and then the acoustic bass up like that. So I've just got this. And there's my sort of double bass sound. So now I go do the share audio again as a WAV file, exporting audio, and when that's done, I can then do the same thing, airdrop the file to my computer. Now I could just put the cursor there, which means that when it exports the audio and I import it, it should put it where the cursor is in Logic. That will save me a bit of time with the dragging. So there we go, that's sending over to my Mac. And now I can do the same sort of thing here. I can go Control Shift and I to import my audio file, Freddy Freeloader 8.wav, and of course it puts it at the nearest bar. That's okay. I can just drag it to fit. There we go. So now I've got just the bass. If I just unsolo everything, I'm just going to put the bass here. Add it to the drums. Just check my counting at the start. Yeah, it's almost there. You can hear the slight phasing of that counting, not being quite there, but it's close enough. So I'm going to do the same thing. Just take my guitar, the bass away, and add my nylon guitar. It's like a sort of classical guitar type thing. So I'll do the same thing again. Just go to Share Audio, WAV, and let that do its thing. And I'm going to import that on the guitar track, which is just down below here. I'll just wait for that to render. Now, this is something that is really a really good idea to do, because actually I could treat that guitar sound a little bit differently. So I'll just send it over to my Mac, nice and quick with AirDrop, so that I can import that audio file. So I'll just go back to my import, Freddy Freeloader 9.wav. Of course, it's not intelligent enough to put, say, guitar, but you just have to keep track of your files. So I'll just make sure that that's roughly in there. Just take the drums, the bass, and the guitar. There we go. So I've just got my guitar on its own there. Now, on this particular version of iRealPro, on this particular tune, actually, if I just go to my mixer, I've only got 3 things: the guitar, the bass, and the drums. How am I going to get piano? Well, the answer is, if I just note that the tempo is 205, if I try, I don't know, medium up-tempo swing, perhaps. Set the tempo to 205. It'll set the tempo to a default value when you change the style. Now, if I go into my mixer, I've got piano. Now I'm going to share the audio of that. So I've actually picked a style that I didn't have when I was doing my gig. So I'm going to share the audio there, share that as a WAV file, export that. And now I'm going to have the piano sound, which wasn't there in the first place on the gig or in the style at all, but I can decide to add it. So you can actually add lots and lots of different things. Now, Why would I go to all this trouble when it's all computer-generated sounds? Why don't I get other people to actually record instruments? And actually, yes, that is the ideal thing. But, we're on our own in our studios during this coronavirus pandemic, and we need to sort of put our material out there. Sometimes, like I try and do something every day. So you're relying, obviously, on lots of players when you do this. So if you're just doing pre-production, and this is also something you could send to lots of people in order that you can get them to put their parts on, thereby gradually stripping off the MIDI sounds. So if I just solo out the instruments now. I've now got my piano there. So if I maybe mute the iReal mix that I had before, just leaving the guitar and the flute and the violin parts that I had on there as well. Now, some of these sounds, the bass sound, for example, if I just play this, it can sound a little bit fake. Now, one way you could try and get rid of this, especially with the bass, is to take all the top end off. And then maybe have a little bit of mid-range and some extra bass. So that you can just lift the actual bass sound a bit, thereby turning the level down. So the bass has just got a bit more energy. Now with the guitar, for example, I've got sort of this nylon guitar sound. It's all right, but I could put it through a guitar amp maybe. Just to give it a little bit more of a presence boost. Of course, you can't do that on iReal, but it doesn't matter, because actually you can just give it your own treatment. Also on iRealPro, you can't pan the instruments. They're kind of it's a stereo output, and you have controls over level only. But on digital audio workstation, you could put the piano one side and the guitar the other, for example. Just to try and sort of separate things out a bit. Now, after you've done all of this, of course, you can just mix to your heart's content. You can EQ the drums by just making a little bit more, maybe a little bit more sort of cymbal sound, perhaps. Or maybe less, and you could actually just up the mid-range a bit. Let's go further into the actual solos. Keeps it nice and earthy if those cymbals aren't too toppy. So there we are. There is really a way of getting somewhere with your iRealPro, not only for the gigs, but actually to be able to produce stuff at home over the top of that gig. And it's something that I do just to to keep putting tunes out. Instead of just the gig, I can put on other things and do to my heart's content, really. Now, the click at the beginning, if you don't have it on the original when you're playing, if you don't have the click on iRealPro, and you find that, if I just go to the mixer, you've got the count-in volume there. It's important to have that at least some way up. In a gig situation, the actual count-in sound is quite unobtrusive, so it doesn't really matter if you've got it. It's just the same as a drummer, just clicking their sticks. So if you think of it in a gig, leave that setting on so that it makes it much easier for you to drag stuff. iRealPro, a real godsend in this sort of pandemic era where we're just trying to get on with stuff, and also do gigs. Of course, bands can't really play at the moment at all, but you can still go busking, or you can play out on the street, or you can do your things like outside the hospital where I do these gigs, and it just makes it just a bit more fun to play with.